Hello, good evening, good afternoon, good morning. In November last year, information leaked out that the president had granted 40,000 US dollars loan to members of parliament. It was called a housing loan, but everybody knew that the sitting members of parliament, their term of office, for some of them at least, would be coming to an end with the coming elections. And we are now in the middle of these elections. And so as of the 24th of August, those who do not get re-elected, they will no longer be members of parliament. And so the 40,000 US dollars housing loan was a bribe. Some people wondered, why would it be a bribe since they are going out? Well, part of the reason for it was to buy their silence, their continued cooperation, and also to entice the opposition that there's more where that came from. And so guaranteeing that whatever happens in these elections, the opposition will be fighting tooth and nail to participate in these so that they could also have a share of this gravy train. But I think one of the other important issues that maybe escaped many of us at the time was that this was the beginning of the slippery slope. Mnangagwa needed to bribe the lawmakers. By the way, there were not only MPs who were given, the MPs were given $40,000 US housing loan. Senators were given the same amount or thereabout. And deputy ministers were given 230,000 US dollars, and ministers were given $500,000. Mnangagwa was bribing the lawmakers ahead of time. And now we know why. Because since then, he has been bribing other senior government officials, like the judiciary, who in June this year, just a few weeks before nomination day, received US 400,000 US dollars housing loan. CIO and other senior members in the security service received 230,000 US dollars or thereabout. And we also know that chiefs had been given cars, twin cab trucks worth US 40 to 60,000 US dollars. Members of church leaders have been given similar donations. So this was the beginning. The November bribe to the MPs was the beginning of an avalanche of vote buying schemes that were to follow. Bribing the lawmakers ahead of time made a lot of sense, because once they had accepted the bribe, they could jolly well start making a lot of questioning where the money was coming from. Was it budgeted for? Because it wasn't budgeted for. And as for where it was coming from, well, we cannot be certain, but we know some of that money must be coming from the gold mafia. And President Mnangagwa, according to the Al Jazeera gold mafia documentary, was the number one, the godfather of the gold mafia, and he was getting his cut. And we also know that looting is not just confined to gold, but to other areas like diamonds, lithium, and other resources. And number one is still number one, and he gets his cut. So most of this money was coming from there. And we are now looking at a situation where if somebody was to audit how much money has been squandered in buying votes in the last 12 months, I would not be surprised at all if we are now looking at 4 to 5 billion or even more US dollars. This is the tragedy of Zimbabwe. Resources are now being, we're selling the family jewels here for the sole purpose of buying votes. For the good of the individual or the few individuals who are in power to stay in power, instead of the resources being spent for the good of the nation. The thing about Zimbabwe is in 1980, a Japanese scholar, Ken Yamamoto, who had been in Zimbabwe and stayed there and had, traveled around and, he wrote an article and was saying the country has the potential of becoming the South Korea of Africa. And I think he was right. The country has the resources and the manpower, and the infrastructure was very good. And if we had managed our resources well, there really was no reason why Zimbabwe could not be the South Korea of Africa. A democratic nation, rich, prosperous, and very stable. Instead, corruption has taken center stage. And needless to say, the amount of reckless spending has been such that it really is unbelievable. Zimbabwe has become one of the poorest countries in Africa. And in terms of the full potential, it's unbelievable. This is because of corruption. And once you have allowed corruption into the system, it's very difficult to uproot. Like I said before, in June, just 2 weeks before nomination day, judges, magistrates, and other senior people in the judiciary received 400,000 US dollars. And in this cartoon, the individual is depicting a judge who has received a brand new car, and his 4,000 US dollars plus the house in the background. Of course, they all knew this is a bribe. No two ways about it. They knew it was a bribe, and it is a bribe. But in this cartoon, the cartoonist is trying to depict how far it has gone. It starts with the ordinary, impoverished Zimbabwean, and they are being bribed with chicken and chips and a soft drink. All the Zanu PF star rallies that Mnangagwa is addressed has been characterized by those attending the rallies being given chicken and chips and a soft drink. Considering the number of people at these rallies, yes, it must have costed him a fortune. But as you go up the ladder, the bribe has become bigger and bigger and bigger. And the judges, those in the judiciary services, are at the top of the ladder. And they are getting the 400,000 US dollars, a new car, a new house, and God knows what else. Of course, they know it's a bribe. Of course, they know they're expected to repay it by turning a blind eye to the rigging that's taking place. And as for the poor at the bottom of the ladder, they are getting the chicken and chips and soft drink during the times of the rally. But the stick is not very far behind, because it is well known that during these elections, Zanu PF has worked up a scheme in which the people, particularly in the rural areas, they are being forced to attend Zanu PF cell meetings, at which a register is being kept of those who attend or who do not attend. And on voting day, the same register will be used to mark off those who come to vote. And there's no doubt that the Zanu PF operatives have got polling stations, voters' rolls, and they'll be able to compare it with their own register to see who has who has voted and who has failed to vote. And I believe that within a matter of an hour or two, when the polling results are out, they'll be able to figure out who voted for Zanu PF just by comparing their own register. Those who went in, for the sake of argument, if there are 200 of them from their own register, and Zanu PF gets 200, then they'll note, okay, so it was our members who voted. And since they've got the polling station voters roll, they also know who was not a Zanu PF member, and they went in to vote. they will know then they must have been the one that voted for the opposition. Chamisa has been boasting about Operation Green Mangoes, in which the opposition supporters are encouraged to attend these Zanu PF cell meetings, and come voting day, they vote for the opposition. If, for the sake of argument, the register shows that 200 Zanu PF members went in and cast their vote, and only 100 voted for Zanu PF, I think the various operatives will just be able to go back to their register and saying, okay, of the 200 Zanu PF members here, who do we suspect double-crossed us? And I think they can guess with some fair degree of accuracy who those who voted, who attended Zanu PF rallies and made Zanu PF regalia, and then on voting day voted for Zanu PF. So it will be easy to tell. So in this particular case, the povo at the bottom, they get the chicken and chips during the day, and at night they get the stick. And if there was to be a runoff, I think those who did not vote for Zanu PF will be punished. We know what happened in 2008 when there was a runoff. My guess is there won't be a runoff because the opportunities for Zanu PF to rig these elections is unbelievable. And it is hard to see how Zanu PF can really fail to secure a victory on the first round because they've got so many opportunities. One of the latest ones is, in fact, the fact that Triple C is almost clear they will not be able to field election agents in all the polling stations. And so if it's Zanu PF operatives who are totally in charge of that polling station, it is hard to see how they can fail to make sure that their candidates secure maximum votes. And who can blame them? So the V11, they can even revise it if they find their candidate is not doing so well. You know, to give them a bigger winning margin, revise it upwards. And given that the SEC officials have been bribed, those in the police force, as we know, have been bribed, and most of the people involved in these elections have been bribed. They now have an invested interest in keeping Zanu PF in power. Even if they see something, they'll say nothing. They'll pretend they didn't see it. The tragedy here is once you've allowed corruption to reach the point we have reached in Zimbabwe, it is really, really difficult to end it. Because even some of these judges must know that if Zanu PF was to lose power, their own position will become untenable. You know, a lifestyle audit of their lives and their wealth would show that there is no way they could have become this rich if they were not some way involved with the corruption. In many ways, the bribes are meant to put the various officials into exactly that position, where they accept the bribe and then they become part of the system. They've got now an invested interest in keeping the status quo. The truth of the matter is, ending corruption in Zimbabwe has become more and more difficult. And these elections, the evidence is overwhelming that the elections are being rigged. And so the prospects, it's almost a certainty that the Zanu PF will be declared the winner at the end of this process. And the prospects of another 5 years of this is daunting. It's truly daunting. Because another 5 more years, the thing, as we have seen in the past, is that these people, somehow they realize that, yes, this corruption cannot carry on forever. And therefore, then they need to steal as much as possible. So already, these last 5 years, we have seen corruption was in overdrive. I've got a feeling that once Zanu PF is retained, I think we're going to see the process somehow. Overdrive usually means the 6th gear, but in this case here, I think they will find another gear, the 7th gear, to go up. Corruption will become even worse. And for the ordinary Zimbabweans, already 49% are living in abject poverty. That number will only increase. And at the end of the 5 years, we'll be looking at another election, and the rich will be even richer than they are, and the appetite to stay in power will be even greater. This is just a situation where you know it has got to end. And when it finally ends, it will end with disastrous consequences for the whole country. Because I don't see it ending peacefully. It's either going to be another coup, or we're going to have the street protests, which will force the regime to finally give up power after a lot of bloodshed and destruction of property and so forth. And the problem with a violent change is that the people who come in would not necessarily be democratic, committed to democratic rule. They will see it as their opportunity to loot, finally. And so Zimbabwe may find itself in a situation where we are a failed state, and recovering is going to be very difficult. I think what I find most disappointing here is that we did have a number of golden opportunities to end this dictatorship and end it peacefully. The best chance was during the GNU of 2008 to 2013. And MDC sold out by failing to implement even one reform. And now the same individuals are selling out by participating in these flawed elections, knowing fully well that the process is flawed, and that by participating, they are only giving the Zanu PF regime legitimacy, and thus perpetuating the system. It is a very difficult situation. And I think the solution is not going to be easy, because now we are well and truly caught between the rock and the hard place. Zanu PF and the opposition. While the ordinary person believes that the opposition is fighting in their corner, the truth of the matter is the opposition has abandoned free, fair, and credible elections. All they want is a share of the spoils of power. The opposition are participating in these elections for the sake of their share of the spoils of power. So in other words, we really have gone full circle. Instead of talking of we have got a judiciary and security services that have been captured by this Zanu PF regime. We really should be talking of, yes, those sectors, but also the opposition, because they are also in these Zanu PF pockets. The opposition are participating in these elections because they want a share of the spoils of power. They want a seat on the gravy train seats. They know that these elections are not free, fair, and credible. They know that they're not going to change anything, but they've got to play their role. Because to give Mnangagwa legitimacy, he needs to say the country has got an opposition. Zimbabwe is a multi-party democracy. And I think the tragedy here is the ordinary Zimbabweans who think they're participating in the hope of bringing about change, not knowing that they are also participating to help give Zanu PF legitimacy and perpetuate their own suffering. This is the reality. And the tragedy is most people don't even realize it. We are participating in these elections to give Zanu PF legitimacy and to perpetuate our own suffering. That is insane, and yet it is true. I think the failure by many ordinary Zimbabweans, particularly the intellectuals, to really see the complexities of our problem is one of the tragedies of Zimbabwe. I think the intellectuals have let the nation down. Most of them have either joined Zanu PF directly or they've been in the opposition, and they're the driving force behind the participation for their share of the spoils of power. And my aunt and uncle in the rural backwaters genuinely believe that the opposition are fighting in their corner, not knowing that the opposition have sold out. They are now running with the hare, the powerful hare, and hunting with the Zanu PF hounds. That is the tragedy. And untangling it is going to be one of the biggest challenges of our generation, if we are going to do it at all. We won't have to wait now. Today is the 17th. The election day is on the 23rd. And by noon on the 24th, I think the results start filtering through. My prediction is Zanu PF will once again win parliamentary majority in parliament and in the Senate. And Mnangagwa will win in the first round. If he was to lose, it will be a runoff. There's no way Zanu PF is going to let Chamisa win these elections. And during the runoff, Mnangagwa will make sure that he secures the victory. But my prediction is he will win the first round. We don't have to wait for very long now. Next Wednesday is voting day. Sadly, by participating, many people have to know that once you have participated, you cannot complain that the elections were rigged, because you knew all along that the elections would be rigged, and you thought you would win them. And so complaining, you can complain all you want, but nobody will be listening. If you're going to complain about these elections being flawed, you've got to complain now and not wait until the election. Unfortunately, the number of people who have been complaining has been disappointing, to say the least, because many people genuinely think there will be change. But I can tell you now, and I'll tell you again, and I've said it before, there will be no change. And by participating, you're giving Zanu PF legitimacy. Mark my word. Thank you and good night.